Hi, hi everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to 1855's Masterclass Fintech Illuminated, proudly presented by Durham Region. Investor. We are so honored to have you here with us tonight as we dive into fintech. You are sure to learn something new. I personally don't know much about fintech, so this is all brand new for me. I'd like to introduce Travis Dutka. He's going to be our host and moderator for this evening. Before we dive in, I would also like to welcome our esteemed 1855 member and owner of Rainspark Media, Melanie Pangan.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Melanie. Thanks for having me here tonight. We are bringing an interactive component to this evening. So please ensure that you are following 1855 Whitby on Instagram because we are doing behind-the-scenes interviews, buzzworthy content, and stuff that you just don't want to miss. So thank you so much for having me tonight, and please ensure you follow us on 1855 Whitby.
Thank you very much, Melanie. And that is at 1855 Whitby. So you can pull out your phones and you can follow them right now so you can get all the buzzworthy content that is coming from Melanie and team at Rainspark Media. Is that the social? At Rainspark Media? Okay. Yep. See? That's why she's a pro. All right. Jokes are going to be tough tonight. So... serious crowd learning about fintech, and I'm looking for my cue in the notes. Carolyn, up next. I would like to not thank you for your speech because you're going to come and do that now, but we're going to have a few words from Carolyn McGregor, who is the Dean of the Faculty of IT at Ontario Tech.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here and to represent the university and my Faculty of Business and IT at Ontario Tech. It's a real honour to be so intrinsically tied with the region, particularly as the Dean of the Business School for the university. Being able to participate and be part of economic development in the region is really important. And so it's a real delight for us to be a sponsor of these events and to be heavily involved. Before we do formally progress with the event, I just would wish to perform a land acknowledgement. So we're situated and we acknowledge the lands of the people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. The lands are situated, that we're situated on are covered under the Williams Treaties, and the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people. We acknowledge the lands out of respect for the Indigenous nations and who have cared for Turtle Island, which is also called North America, from before the arrival of the settler people until this day. Most importantly, remember the history of these lands have been tainted by poor treatment and a lack of friendship with the First Nations who call these lands home. The history is something that we're all affected by, as we are all treaty people in Canada, and we have a shared history to reflect on and for each of us to consider that as we move forward. Our past defines our present, but if we move forward as friends and allies, then it doesn't define our future. Thank you, and I really hope you enjoy this evening to learn more about fintech.
Thank you, Carolyn, and very proud to be a graduate of Ontario Tech. Please don't hold it against them. A 2008 BCom student, so we've got a connection. Please hold the applause. All right. Because we are here, one of the exciting features is that we are going to hear from Sid Paquette, who oversees RBCx, which is I need bigger letters here. I get so excited and I start talking. I'm like, there's words on the page that I need to very closely follow here. The technology, wow, and reading, stay in school, kids. The technology innovation arm of RBC, dedicated to helping Canadian tech companies scale across every stage of their growth journey. So without further ado, big round of applause for Sid Paquette.
How is everyone tonight? Good? Oh, awesome. All right, we're good. I got to be careful. Yeah, there's some lights. That's good because I will absolutely fall off the stage, and I apologize for the glare. Just show of hands, not that I can see all of them. How many entrepreneurs in the room? Oh, awesome. So we've got a ton of folks here building the next generation of tech companies. So that's fantastic. I'm going to give you my opinion, semi-informed, take it for what it is. And I'm going to talk about a few different things. I'm going to talk about the fundraising environment, which, I think, a lot of you probably are in the middle of or have navigated or come out on the other side of. I'm also going to talk about some key industry trends, right? I'm going to talk about AI, which is relatively interesting and pertinent topic in this country at the moment. I'm going to talk about kind of what's happening in the digital asset space. I'm also going to talk about healthcare, and then finally climate. And, just kind of give you guys again, a little bit of an opinion as to kind of where we're at, some of the secular trends we're seeing, and then maybe just, hopefully, give you guys some food for thought as you're building the next generation of Canadian unicorns. So, I'm going to kick it off, and, I'm going to just jump right in on the AI discussion. Maybe I'm holding this too close. On the AI discussion. So one of the things, again, how many folks here are doing anything in AI, whether it's traditional AI or Gen AI, show of hands? Okay, so we've got a large number of folks here as well. From an AI perspective, so there's a lot of buzz around Gen AI. And, I suspect that over the course of the next year, you're going to see a lot of that buzz start to go away. I think what's happened with generative AI, we've done a phenomenal job of getting the public on board with Gen AI. We probably all have ChatGPT on our phones and we use it. Universities are using it now and they're encouraging students to use it. But then obviously they're encouraging them to avoid hallucinations and make sure that you back check the work as well. But they are incorporating that technology. So we're seeing that happen now across the country and globally. Super, super important stuff. The challenges are kind of where we're at versus, I think perception versus reality is we're really in the first inning of what we're doing from an AI perspective, right? We are not even into the second inning. We've started with foundational LLM models. And by the way, if folks have questions or comments, just throw them out during kind of this, this speech. I'm happy to answer them and take them. But we've got foundational, LLM models, right? So folks like Gemini, Cohere, OpenAI, which we're familiar with, Anthropic, and others, all building foundational large language models. Fantastic, right? And it is an input that's really, really important. However, LLMs use one input, and that's language, right? And I would argue that that is a not terribly valuable input. It's a valuable input to drive process efficiency on stuff that we don't like to do. We're going to learn a lot from it. But it's not really a huge competitive advantage, right? And so from my perspective, when I look at generative AI and I see companies that are being built, and I'll exaggerate a little bit, but it's probably not far off, right? Like if you've got a company and you've built your Gen AI company using large language models that are public, and you've built that company in 6 months, that's amazing. And you've done some really, really amazing things. But if you start to generate real traction in that company, I can assure you that in 2 months, there's going to be 6,000 competitors that are doing exactly the same thing that you're doing, and they're leveraging the exact same foundational model technology that you're leveraging. And so long term, ultimately, I think there's a race to kind of get there and get some process efficiencies, but eventually everyone's going to catch up, and we're all going to be static on that. But also keep in mind that LLMs use one input, and that's language, right? This is my own personal view, the big competitive differentiator in AI is not language. It is transaction data, right? And so if you look at organizations like, if I take RBC as an example, we've got 160 years of transaction data. That is super, super important data, right? Like We can't mine it necessarily the way we want to mine it today, and that's where folks like you are going to be able to help large organizations do that. But that is the competitive differentiator. The challenge that we have is we're never going to take your transactional data and leverage a public foundational LLM model or a foundational transactional model to leverage that data, because we can't have your data go to the cloud, right? So it's never going to happen. And so that's where, for me, from an AI perspective, what I see is one of the big kind of key differentiators moving forward is not kind of where we're at today. It's probably inning 3, to be honest, where we're going to go, and not even close to a home run or a triple or a double, and we're not even close to the 7-inning stretch on this one. But what we're doing is we're starting to build up to private AI networks, and so to the extent that you guys as entrepreneurs who are in AI and you're thinking about some of these things, like think just a few innings down the road in terms of what you can do from, a transactional model perspective. And the challenge that fintechs have, and every fintech has this, because, if I was to ask everybody in this room to name your top 3 fintechs and just even do it in your head, I will bet a lot of money that most of the fintechs you are going to think of immediately were created since 2008. So fintechs haven't been around for a very long time, which means they don't have a lot of data. They don't have a lot of transaction data. Even if they have 1 billion points of data, it's not that much data, right? And so where they struggle is training models, getting access to that data, which again, they can't spend 160 years getting access to that data to drive insights that are ultimately going to drive, material, sustainable, competitive business decisions. And so as you guys are thinking about AI and what to build, capitalize on your differentiator, right? One of your differentiators are you guys can move really, really fast and you're very, very innovative. Where you're deficient is going to be on the data. And so what I think folks in AI, whether it's Gen AI or call it more traditional AI, folks that have been doing AI since 2006 as an example, is really around what do you do and how do you leverage somebody else's data. And again, I don't have the answer for this, and this is something that collectively we're going to have to figure out, but you're not going to get access to the data as you think you will get access to the data, or as you want to get access to the data, because a lot of the large organizations that have the data, we can't allow that data. We're all individuals. You can't allow your transaction data to go to the cloud. So how do you build those private AI networks? And for folks that are thinking about it, to me, that's a sustainable competitive advantage, right? Because when I look at what we do with 160 years of transactional data, if we're able to leverage that, that is way better than somebody who's got 20 years of transactional data, right? And we should be able to make better decisions, better predictions, and ultimately drive more revenue and benefit and community and all the other good things that come with it by virtue of leveraging that data to its fullest, right? So that's some of the stuff that we're thinking about on the AI side, which is, what I view as really, really important. And again, Gen AI is just one piece of it. Again, I think we're going to see that, a lot of the Gen AI companies, they're going to, they need to get access to the data. So as you guys are thinking about it, just think about that aspect of it. Fortunately, I don't have the answer for you because it's not an easy transaction that you have to negotiate there with large enterprise, but large enterprise does have that data, right? And those private AI networks are going to be increasingly important. And so that's one thing I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys about as fintech creators, fintech builders, looking to build the next generational in this country. You got to think about how do you get access to the data? And if you can't get access to the data to leverage it across, all of your customers, how do you build your company to scale alongside some of the other bigger folks that actually do have the data? And so that's just one piece. And again, we're engaged with all of the big AI providers. Again, I've mentioned a few already. We're engaged with all of them, but they're on very small and self-contained components, right? A lot of the big orgs are actually creating their own data, their own models to leverage their own data because we can't use these public AI models. So one thing, again, for you guys to consider on the AI side, this is super hot with all these lights, man. Geez, I'm starting to sweat, and so I'm not nervous. It's really hot up here. I also wanted to talk to you guys about fundraising. So the fundraising environment has been absolutely bananas for the last couple of years, as you guys know. So we've kind of gone through a pretty ridiculous fundraising situation in the last, certainly since 2022. For those of us that, are old enough like myself and have no hair and have lived through a number of these cycles, this is the exact same cycle that we lived through in 2000. It's the exact same cycle that we lived through in 2008, 2009. And now you can add 22, 23 to that cycle. And what we saw in those cycles, and you guys would be, for folks that are either looking to raise capital or have investors and you're feeling the pressure, this comment's probably going to resonate with you. We had a massive shift happen in 2022 where, you had investors who were very much focused on growth. And then they went, well, hold on a second. No, we want you guys to get profitable now. And so you had to do a whole bunch of stuff, change your business significantly to get profitable, right? Or at least near profitability. That was a huge, huge exercise that happened for tech companies in 22, 23. Nobody cared about growth anymore. They really wanted profitable growth. And that's challenging in the tech world where most things are not profitable, right? It's hard to build cutting edge solutions, out of the gate profitably, right? Because you're not a services business. And so that's something that you guys have had to live through. It's super, super challenging. And, but it's going to change. And we're actually seeing that change happen already. So for folks who have had to pull back on their businesses, had to retrench, change their business model a little bit, we are now seeing that, the venture capitalists, the private equity folks, they're now actually talking about growth again, which is exactly what we saw in 2001, 2002, 2003. It's the exact same thing that we saw from 2009 to 2012. Exactly what we're going to see, call it from 2024 onwards as well, where we're going to start getting back into that growth mindset. And certainly the nice thing is about all of the stuff that you guys have lived through, because you've either created companies in the worst economic environment in the last 15 years, which is amazing, because the best companies are actually created after big economic cycles. So you guys have, just by odds, high degree of success behind you, or odds for success. So congratulations on that. Or you've lived through the pain of doing reductions in workforce, having, you're laying people off, you're reorganizing your company, you're changing your business model, you're adapting kind of how you operate, and the pain that's associated with that is terrible and it's horrific because we deal with human beings. But ultimately, you're coming out on the other side of that. And you're actually, right now, I think we've got the best quality companies that I have seen in the last 20 years. We are seeing now by virtue of the resets that we've had to see over the last couple of years. And so we're starting to see those things turn. And thankfully now the funding partners, they are starting to get back interested in growth, which we all knew they would. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by the end of 2024. We're not going to be back at growth at all costs. But we're starting to now see folks who go, hey, you've got clear visibility to profitability. That's amazing. Now I need you to focus on growth, because venture capital firms and private equity firms, they're not going to do very well if your company's valued off an EBITDA multiple. They're going to do really well if they're valued off of a growth multiple. And so that's where we're ultimately moving to. And so I think that's going to be really good for folks in the room. The other thing that's good, and maybe a little bit of a red herring, and I'll explain it in a second, is we have more private capital in the ecosystem today than has ever been in the ecosystem in the history of time. So the last time I checked the data, it was about $290 billion of dry powder in the system today in North America. By dry powder, I just really mean accessible capital within, that's already been committed to venture capital funds and private equity funds. The challenge is you kind of think, $290 billion, that's a lot of capital. That means everybody in this room should easily get funded. The challenge is not all dry powder is the same, right? And so what we found is in 2022 and 2023 in particular, folks who had dry powder were leveraging that dry powder for their existing investments. And so it made it increasingly challenging for folks who were looking and maybe didn't have an investor or were looking for a new investor. It became very hard to attract that new capital, right? I think we're going to start seeing that shift a little bit. I actually thought we would start seeing that shift happen probably in the next quarter, but we actually started to see that shift happen, in the fall of 2023, where, some of the companies started to raise some external capital, doing rounds that were oversubscribed, not amazing kind of pre-COVID valuations, but like reasonable valuations, right? And enabling these companies to grow into like really big businesses. So that's what we're seeing on the funding side. And so I would encourage you, be patient. As much as it's a pain to pitch investors and scrounge for capital, this is where government sources can be super, super helpful, super, super forgiving. And honestly, it's a great way to have non-dilutive capital to build your business. So like focus in on that as well, but it is going to open up for you on the venture capital private equity side. And so we are seeing those tides start to turn, which again, super interesting. The other thing too is, again, I was a VC, still kind of am a VC. A lot of people don't like VCs, which I totally understand. I don't like a lot of them, to be honest. And they're having the exact same problem. So you guys aren't in this boat alone as entrepreneurs. VCs can't get the funding for their funds, right? So emerging managers are struggling mightily to raise capital, right? Because big limited partners are going, listen, I don't really know you. You don't really have a track record. We're through the days where we're just going to throw capital around and hope for a return. We're going to instead deploy our capital into money managers who actually know how to generate a return, know how to attract the best investments, et cetera. And so again, you guys have been super patient, super, forgiving and driving and innovative over the last couple of years. Continue to do that, because this is now going to be the time when the best companies are created. If you look back at, post 2000, so call it 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, some of the best tech companies that you can think of were created in those years. Same thing post the 2009 collapse. I believe it's going to be the exact same thing 2024. So you're in good company. There's going to be a lot of really good, resilient companies created. So just keep at it. So that's my commentary on fundraising. I wanted to talk a little bit about digital assets. So cryptocurrency, digital assets. I don't know, show of hands. Can't really see everyone, but like, how many people here own Bitcoin? Okay, so we've got a few, so not a ton. We are starting to see changes in the digital assets landscape as well, right? So we're starting to see near-term applications being deployed that are actually better than what we could do in a non-digital world. And so we're starting to see some of those things happen. You're also starting to see large financial institutions now getting more and more comfortable with the digital asset and cryptocurrency space. We have a lot of technologies now, whether it's CipherTrace, whether it's Elliptic, whether it's, what's the other one? CipherTrace, Elliptic, Chainalysis, right? So all of those technologies allow financial institutions to manage their anti-money laundering, make sure that, again, bad things aren't happening in the crypto world. So those technologies, which really remove a lot of the anonymity away from the digital asset world, those have gotten a lot better, even in the last 5 years, right? And so now you're seeing folks like JP Chase, right? They're doing some stuff in the digital asset space. Seeing BlackRock just announced a Bitcoin Trust ETF, which has now been one of the highest flying Bitcoin ETFs in the world. And it's just had massive inflows in terms of investment. So big financial institutions are starting to get a little bit more comfortable. I think we'll start seeing that trend start to carry forward as well. It might be 2025, it might be 2026, but I think you're going to start to see this because the demand is there. And so when there's that demand and the monitoring tools are better, then you're going to start to see a lot of the big financial players start coming back into the space and kind of start adopting that technology. And so I think you're going to see some of that stuff. At least that's some of the stuff that we're seeing. Also wanted to talk to you guys. That's okay. I'm going to talk really fast. Healthcare. Right now we've got, so healthcare in Canada, we've got some amazing scientists in this country, like off the charts, right? And you're seeing huge companies being built in a relative short period of time in the life sciences space in this country. It's because of our talent that we have here. And it's also because of the opportunity, right? And again, we're all individuals. We're all enormously complex. We can't figure out our bodies. This is where, again, we talked about AI. There's a lot of AI deployment being done in this space. It's being done to find better drugs, to service us better, personalized healthcare, all of these sorts of things. We've got, by estimates, 10,000 diseases that impact people globally, of which 500 of those 10,000 have an FDA-approved treatment plan, right? So there's a huge, huge opportunity there. Again, whether it's, small molecule, large molecule, there's a bunch of, complexity here, but super, super interesting, innovative technologies that are happening. And again, this is where you're going to see stuff like AI being coupled with it. Keep talking, just because I know Travis is going to pull me off here shortly. Climate. So this is kind of where I'm going to finish off with, is climate. We're all impacted by climate. And for those of us who have, children, and we don't want to leave a really terrible world for them, like, we're now starting to think about climate. My one challenge to everybody in the room who's thinking about climate is we've got to do this in a scalable fashion, right? And again, this is where, age and experience may come, provide a little bit of benefit just in terms of context, but we went all in on climate in about 2010, and we went all in from an investment perspective. Billion-dollar funds were created to fund climate opportunities, change the world, make the world a better place. Every single one of those funds netted as zero, right? They all lost their shirt. And they lost their shirt largely because the climate opportunities were not scalable. So unlike, tech companies where you start with something small and you incrementally build on top of it, a lot of the climate opportunities are, hey, I need to build a $75 million pilot plant. And congratulations, if this works, and there's no guarantee it will, but if it does work, well, then I need $15 billion to scale it. And I actually don't know if I can scale it, right? So I guess my challenge to folks on the climate is we've got to address this. This is key. This is key to me. This is key to you. This is key to future generations. We've got to address it. We've just got to address it in a real scalable fashion. And that's where the capital is today. The capital from a VC perspective is not funding big capital, deployments on pilot plants and things like that. We don't have a project financing model in Canada. We need to get one, right? And so we've got to get government involved to kind of help us support these things. But these are some of the areas where, again, we've got to work on. We've got to make some changes, but we've got to do it smarter than what we did previously. And then the other thing, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, is when you see climate companies and they're like, yeah, like, I've got this pilot plant, and you know what, our gross emission reduction is X. They never talk about the net emission reduction, right? And the net emission reduction is, what are the emissions that you're emitting to reduce the emissions that you're dealing with, right? And so we got to just let's just be honest with ourselves and go, we may have to make an investment where it's not all that efficient and we're actually not contributing to the better health of our planet, but we think long-term we will. But let's just be honest with ourselves on that and just let's look at everything on a net basis, not on a gross basis, because I think a lot of climate tech companies carve that out, and it is very, it's not very forthright. So anyway, so some of that stuff. And then I think I'm getting the axe right now. I would say, and you guys know this already, but what you guys are building today was viewed as impossible 20 to 30 years ago, hands down. Everything you guys are doing 20, 30 years ago, absolute an impossibility, right? Which highlights that impossibility is a point in time task, right? So keep pushing against it. The line between crazy and visionary is very, very small. We don't know where we are on the line, right? So you could be, you move from crazy to visionary in a day. Could be that you never get there, but you got to just keep pushing. So I encourage you guys, keep fighting against the impossibility, keep driving, keep building, keep doing all the things that you guys personally believe are going to change the world in some shape or form, and keep driving that way. So again, thank you. I want to say thanks to Kayla as well for bringing all of us together, and I look forward to interacting with as many of you as possible afterwards. Thank you.
All right, big thank you to Sid. Also, Durham AI submitted a bunch of questions, which Sid, you covered, I think most of them in your conversation, so thank you. Sid's going to hide in the corner. Sid, one question before you're done and we bring up our panelists. For those of us in the room who are interested in kind of honing our skill, keeping our ear to the ground, book, podcast, what's something in the fintech space that maybe you're listening to? Maybe not. Maybe it's outside that inspires you inward, but it's unrelated. But what's something you're listening to, reading that inspires you that maybe we could check out?
So I'll tell you what.
In 1 minute or less.
Yeah, 1 minute or less. So I personally, like, for me, I really like reading. Like, I read a lot of stuff for work. And, you know, again, that's really nice and smart about it. But I really like reading prescient, like, science fiction type stuff. Take my mind to a different place. There's a particular author. I'm a massive, massive fan of this person. They were actually on retainer by Microsoft for years and years and years. It's an author by the name of Neil Stephenson. Neil Stephenson wrote a book called Snow Crash, which, like, that was the book that defined the term metaverse that is now used. That's where that was done. That book was written 20 or 30 years ago, right? And so everything this individual has written is like, you know, if you read one of his books from 20 or 30 years ago, you'll read it today and you'll be like, I can actually see that happening in the next 5 years, right? So I really like reading his stuff because it really does bring forward the ability to do some of these predictions, think crazy, eventually crazy becomes reality. So Neil Stephenson is one of my favorite authors, and I try to read as much of his stuff as I possibly can.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sid. Big round of applause for Sid Paquette.
And
Really digging this transition music. All right, so without further ado, we're going to bring up our panel here, and Kayla's going to print it bigger than 6 font next time. I'm just joking. It's like 18. I just can't read. Sid likes reading. I'm audiobooks. All right, thank you. All right, so our panel. Big round of applause. We have Brion, Hendry, Nico, Federico, and bringing back Carolyn, McGregor, and our amazing host, who can read and talk, Travis Dutka. All right, big round of applause for everybody.
Thank you, Nico.
All right. Check our mics real quick. Hello.
Check 1.
Check 2.
Check 3.
Check 3. All right. Whoa. Maybe just to get started, we'll start with you, Brion. But a quick introduction. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, that's a great question. Brion Hendry, I'm a partner with BDO, so we're a professional services firm. Actually, the audit practice for the GTA. Auditor by trade, former, and hoping to be was hoping to be a professional hockey player, couldn't cut it, so became an auditor instead. That said, I also, as part of the other hat that I wear for the firm, is I lead our innovation practice for the insurance practice. So we think of things like Fintech, AI, and how we're going to leverage that from an assurance perspective, make audit exciting again. That's basically one of my top jobs. Jay's shaking his head.
I'm pumped. Carolyn.
So before I was Dean of the Faculty of Business and IT, and before I even came to Canada from Australia, if you're trying to pick my accent, I was actually implementing analytics platforms for a number of the banks in Australia. I implemented the first one for one of the largest banks in Australia, then was headhunted to the largest retail chain in Australia to deploy their first analytic platform, and then was consulting for a number of years and consulted to another couple of the banks. So when this topic came up, it resonated really well with me because even though I'd switched to healthcare and applying AI to healthcare, I was profiling people like all of you a long time ago and your spending patterns, your use of your bank accounts for a long time.
I feel so violent.
This is just the beginning. All right, Nico.
Thank you, Brion. So I'm Nico. I like to call myself a relentless visionary leader, but I'm mainly a BI specialist. I started working in the bank environment in year 2000, more or less. Since there, I moved to Canada in 2011, worked with HSBC, worked with Bank of Canada. Was lucky enough to have a small section working with 360, where I met amazing Travis and a huge crowd of people that I still love at this day. And yeah, so that's my experience. And it was really interesting when Kayla reached out asking about fintech, and I was saying, yeah, I've been working with that since like a long time ago. Then I realized there is actually a distinction between the dinosaur fintech, which is like the old legacy systems, and the modern fintech. That is where we actually speaking about today.
Awesome. All right. So first question, looking at what happens to organizations or even within organizations when they overlook fintech or maybe don't update and grow with fintech.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, please.
All right. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of companies that have started in their garage and worked all the way out through to private equity or to IPO. And that scalability factor, it's only, I'll say, exemplified if they actually embrace technology properly. Because what ends up happening, especially on the finance side, not saying this because I'm an auditor, we go in there and look at all the papers, everything that's there, but it can become a massive time suck. And I think for a lot of companies, and I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, for those that have been through that cycle that didn't modernize their financial processes, didn't embrace that technology, it really held them back from being able to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Carolyn.
Yeah, I think one of the key benefits is you really don't know your business well enough unless you're really understanding all of the data that your business is generating and understanding those patterns, as I was mentioning, about whether it's your customers or your suppliers. There's this wealth of opportunity, and an interesting analogy that's still the type of thing that can happen today. That one of the things we eliminated initially was what we used to call the doorstopper report. So it literally was a printout of all this information about every account type and every branch, and that was on it. Like every branch was on its own page, and there were a couple of hundred of those. So it was a stack of paper that sat, and literally someone used to deliver the new one every day, and it held someone's door open. Now that's a physical representation of wasted data, but it still can be the same today. That even if you're implementing tools, if you're not actually utilizing the information your organization is generating, then it really is missed opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. Nico.
So thinking of the missed opportunities, one of the biggest one I think is with the customer relation and how fintech can help companies to get out there to the different consumers and give them a better customer experience. And this is really in our face when we just day to day, we go and we check out the website of a company that we like. They have an amazing website. They have all the products there. You look for the card and there's no card. Or you want to do a gift card, they don't have the gift card. And you're like, so, okay, I need to do this now. And you will just go to another company that has the service, although maybe it's not exactly the company that you love.
I'm thinking of fintech, it's quite a broad category. Mm-hmm. Hearing each of you talk a little bit of a different angle. When entrepreneurs or people that are dipping their toe into this space, Carolyn, you talked about analytics. So maybe they've got the customer experience, but they're lacking the experience on the analytics side. I guess kind of a two-part question, but how to or where to start in, one, trying to figure out what you don't know, but then two, finding the right partner to start to look at that data. So starting with Carolyn, but Brion or Nico, but the unanalyzed analytics, right? The unanalyzed data. Where do you start to maybe audit what you have? Yeah, that's for you. Yeah, I was listening. But where do you even start to go? What useful stuff do I have that I don't even realize I haven't? Mm-hmm. And then what do you start to do with it when maybe your product is the experience, but you could improve it, to Nico's point, when you start to look at that data. So where would someone start to go, what data do I have and how do I look at it in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, I think that you really have to take very much a holistic approach to what you're trying to achieve. And I like the way that you said, what are the things that come naturally to you as the entrepreneur, to the team that you have, and often whether it comes down to like a skill matrix or, you're really starting to capitalize and understand what do you have experiences, whether it's like with rebates or whether it's with gift cards. I had to throw that in. Or with gift cards or auditing, what are the experiences that you already have? And then you think about the services you're trying to provide and where are those gaps? And then is it a matter of partnering with service organizations that provide those particular financial services or can assist you with understanding how to answer certain questions? I think one of the key aspects of analytics is really understanding the question that you want to answer. And whether it's the work that I was doing in the bank or the work that I've done with neonates, looking at physiology and even astronauts now, the questions you start with are not actually the questions you move to. So realizing that you're going to go on an evolution with your questioning, because the more you learn, the more you realize the question you thought you wanted to ask and get an answer for is actually not the true question.
I think we're done. That was good. Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. Gentlemen, either one of you want to jump in on that idea around analytics or the data that you have? Brian?
Yeah, I think the only I would add is, like, her answer was fantastic, so too much to add, but add diversity to the questions that are there. So, if you're operating within the finance department and you're looking at the analytics that you particularly focus on, you're going to have a bias to focus on those types of analytics. So if you have a sales department, if you have a customer service department, have those people be part of the conversation, because they're going to have a different lens on your business. And more importantly, ask your clients, what do they value? What are they looking for? And then you can pull that back into your data and say, okay, how can we tweak how we operate to make our client experience that much better?
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Nico?
I really like that segue because speaking of clients, big companies, and like working with what you have, I think one of the key things that most often we put myself also in that picture for small things overlook is sometimes we need the help of professionals, because just doing a day-to-day example, if we have a car, maybe we're able to change the oil, change the tires, and use it to go grocery. But if we need to take the car on a racetrack, probably I wouldn't be so comfortable on doing myself the job. I would like to have someone that knows exactly how to tune the car perfectly. And same also with data. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in any environment, any company I've worked with in the past, I don't count them, how many years, is the quality of the data. Because like for any recipe, if you have cheap ingredients, you will get a cheap result. So the data needs to be clean, the data needs to be precise, and we'll see also that probably later, speaking of AI, if you feed AI dirty data, poor quality data, you will get poor quality answers.
Absolutely. And in terms of the future of fintech, looking out 5-10 years from now, what do you think will be one of the biggest changes or evolutions in fintech? And you can't say AI. We talked about that already. No, AI can tie into the answer. I'm making that rule up.
I can start us off, and it's I guess moving forward and continuing with a trend that we're seeing. So in my day, as you might say, we started off with the financial institutions were very much the core and the spoke of there was the ledger, the infrastructure. It was all that financial institutions. And what we've seen in the last 20 years is that the spokes really have built out. So there are so many financial institutions that are trying to access that ledger. And, now we're trying to decentralize where we keep the information about our savings and all of those things. But what's happening now is the rim, or the outer part now, where the people are, they're taking on a lot more responsibility and a lot more of a part in the process. And I think that we're starting to just see more of that responsibility and ownership moving out. And so the fintech, a lot of the fintech really is so much customer facing now. And so organizations are trying to now integrate that customer facing fintech within their organizational experience. So that would be my prediction.
Yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. Brian?
In terms of where it'll be in 5 to 10 years, I'd say I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I had an answer for that.
Right.
That said, I think we're just going to see continuous rapid scale. And Sid was talking about transactional models. If you think about fintech, it's based around transactions. And that transactional data, the more we can get access to it, the cooler things we're going to be able to create. So I think about fintech and how it's going to continue to expand, as Carolyn was saying, it's going to lead into so many different aspects of business that's never touched on before. Might even go to culture.
Yeah, I think
But
so.
it's going to continue to just continue to grow at a rapid scale. And the entrepreneurs of the room, I think we're going to see some pretty exciting stuff that comes out of it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
I see some challenges for the regulator authorities because nowadays they are risking to stay behind with the speed with which the technology is evolving, AI coming into the picture. Everything in the fintech environment is evolving really fast. And we already know that in the past years, some of the companies that started in the fintech, in the modern fintech, were kind of the gray area of the regulatory systems and compliance because there were not specific rules for those new environments. And so the regulatory had to kind of run after them, trying to catch up with what they're doing. So one of the biggest things will be that those offices will need to speed up and get up to the game.
Yeah. One thing we didn't talk about, and I know we're coming to the conclusion here, but I would be curious to know just some thoughts around security. Because we haven't talked about that at all. And as almost every business has some component in fintech, before when it was just the fin, right? Without the tech, it almost was a different world. But when fintech enters and everyone has some part of fintech in their business, academia, everywhere is touching on this. Where does security fit in to that? And how could we in this room be thought forward around security, especially as it ties into fintech?
That's huge.
You're after an audit?
Yeah. What are some things that we can be keeping top of mind? Because I don't think that necessarily is one of the first things we think of. We think of innovation, we think of speed, we think of connections. But where does security come in your perspective?
I think security and maybe the lack thereof or the lack of comfort and regulation around it is probably the biggest obstacle for fintech.
Okay.
So people's comfort and understanding of what fintech is or how reliant they're being on the devices that are in their pockets, how their information is shared amongst other organizations, is actually probably the biggest obstacle that fintech needs to get through.
Yeah.
So from a security perspective, for us as people that are adopting this technology, it's about getting comfortable. It's about understanding what assurances are out there, how they can be protected, how to protect themselves. Every app that you open up, everybody accepts those cookies right away and knows where all that information goes.
I read them all.
Yeah. But we've come such a habit now just to move on and move past it.
Yeah.
I think we, at some point in time, have to take a step back and make sure that we understand what we're accepting. So just be cautious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, for me, security is an interesting question because I think about two aspects. I think about harm and I think about individuality. And to your point about, we have to make our own choices about how secure, the judgments we make about security of things. But I also think we have to think about harm. And so if, our savings accounts are drained, that can be significant harm. But then generationally, people give away a lot more information in the younger generations about themselves than they would give away in the older generations. So, and even people today, how many of all of you have the Bluetooth on your phone? How many of you even know whether the Bluetooth is on your phone? And how many of you realize that while you're sitting here, your phone's going, I'm here, the whole time with its Bluetooth. So you're actually giving out information you didn't even realize that you're giving out just by having a functionality in your phone inherently needing to constantly say, I'm discoverable, I'm here, and that stores and banks and everyone's using that information to know it's you or your phone is moving around in those ways.
I'm sorry I asked about security.
Don't ask the one who's the dean of cybersecurity.
But it is incredible that, and I even think about 360 Insights and how we've grown over the years. And at the end of the day, like every company that's involved in technology is a security company at its core. If they're not, informing the customer, thinking about the customer and their clients, we're missing that opportunity, one, to protect their data and to inform, and could potentially erode the entire trust in the business. if there's a breach, right, of the harm or the personal information. Nico, final thoughts on security?
I would say, luckily on the security, I totally agree with what we just spoke about. But I think that one of the positive notes there is that nowadays with the fintech and the new technologies are coming out, and having them to rely and comply with security rules and regulations, if we use them and we do our investigation of which are the safe ones, so not just going out blindly and picking the one that everyone is using just because it's the most fancy, but doing some research on which are the better rated, the ones that check all the boxes, they need to comply with the security. So we already have a little bit of advantage on that. Then, of course, we need to be careful of what we are sharing. So being in the bank environment, logically, all the personal information and so on is something that's really critical and should never be shared. And when AI came along, first flag for it was like, don't share any client data on the AI, because there were people that, I need to do this, so we'll start typing information or like plunging in data that should never be shared outside of the room because they need an answer and said, let's just use AI. So there is some good news on the security, I believe, using some secure solutions on fintech companies. But on the other side, as Carolyn said, we need to do our research, we need to investigate and make sure that we know where we are putting our eggs.
Yeah, and as entrepreneurs, having a security-first mentality as we approach the build, the product, everything that we're doing allows us to come confidently to market. Sid optimistically talked about the funding available, as we refine our pitches as we get out there, knowing that security will be a big question as this get looked at. Firing line.
Can I just do a small pun to the old dinosaurs in the fintech?
Yes.
So they complain about like having the phone application with the bank account on your phone that's not secure, because if they stole the phone and you go and check it out, you have biosecurity on it, you need to put the code in. Every time you're doing something, it asks you to wash your face or put the thumb across. You log into your bank account, it's like probably 4 digits if you're lucky, some banks. And once you're in, you can like e-transfer whatever you want.
And if they've ever watched Italian Job, it's easy.
Exactly. Cool bars.
Final question before we get to the next thing of the evening. Book, podcast, something that inspires you. And I love Sid kind of opened it up, not in like a fintech podcast talking more about fintech, but the idea of expanding, your mind and creativity. Maybe it's a fintech podcast, maybe it's a book, but what could we leave the audience with around something that you're into as you expand your knowledge and your quest in this space?
Sure.
Brion?
Not fintech specific, but definitely AI related. There's a professor at U of T. His name's AJ Agrawal. If you get a chance to check him out, I'd say listen to what he has to say. Really, really advanced on the AI front. He has a couple of books out there, one being Predictive Machines. Really, really great read. Really interesting in terms of the insights that are there. So I'd say check that out.
Awesome. Thanks, Brion. Carolyn?
I'm really interested in the way people perceive innovation. And so there's a book called Crossing the Chasm. And it's about how their own biases or unconscious biases are impacting their uptake of technology. And even whether their own personal views for their own personal devices versus what they use in the organization. Because we all bring to the table, even when you come today to talk about fintech, we all bring to the discussion our own biases. And even introducing an avatar persona to technology, automatically a lot of people will engender a lot more trust because they're interacting with something like them, even though all you've done is put an avatar in front of the existing technology that was there before. So reading about those things I find really interesting.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. Nico?
And I think I'm outside of the trend here. So I instead like to search for more sources. Normally what I do, I just go on the internet, I try and search for what I'm looking for, and I always try to find a different source. And this is just to avoid bias, because maybe I have a mindset, but I like to hear from several voices and then try from my common sense to make a decision of what makes sense to me. Then logically there is, as mentioned before, experts that you should follow. So logically I will not go and look for a Mickey Mouse on fintech, speaking about fintech, but maybe trying and sticking with, for sure, some key ones would be Forbes. I think the other one was McKinsey, another site I was looking at today, that are really professionally built and they have good information on it. But I think finally it's interesting to read everything that we can, but let's keep like ourselves in a state where we are able to make a decision of what we think about something and not having someone else steer us towards what they think.
I just use ChatGPT to think for me now, so it's quite handy. Awesome. Brion, Hendry, Carolyn, McGregor, Nico, Federico. Big round of applause for our panelists here. Head down. It's my foot. It's asleep. That's awkward. All right. That concludes our panel and our keynote speaking part of the evening. I've never had my foot fall asleep when I've been doing this before, so I'm going to stand here for a few minutes. But Simon Gill from Durham is going to come up and share some closing remarks. So Simon, and then I'll get off the stage in just a moment, as soon as I can walk properly. Okay, there we go.
Right on. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm Simon. Wow, you really can't see anyone else. Awesome. I am with Durham, and we promote the region for new investment. We help businesses to establish here and create great jobs. We grow tourism in the rural economy, and we love supporting events like 1855 Masterclass because we do as much as we can to support and enable our innovation community to solve global challenges. And I was listening to Sid talk about two things that kind of resonated with me. The first is transactional AI and scalability when it comes to climate. And, when I think about those two things, transactional AI and the rapid growth that we're going to see, it requires a lot of raw processing power. And that electricity is going to have to come from non-emitting sources if we want to do this in a scalable way that is going to respond to the climate emergency. And we all just so happen to be sitting in the clean energy capital of Canada, Durham region. And we produce a third of Ontario's power, and Ontario's power is already over 90% emission-free. So I think Durham especially, but Ontario particularly, is really well situated in the global landscape to contribute to those two parts of what Sid was talking about in Fintech. So I see a lot of great interplay between Durham region's economy and the rapid growth that we're going to see in Fintech. And it's my sincere pleasure to thank Sid for being here tonight to share those insights and our great panelists and the discussion today. And it's our great pleasure to be a sponsor of this event. So thank you to 1855 for organizing, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Simon. Oh, I did make the font too small. I'm sorry. So that concludes everything for today. I just wanted to give a few personal shout outs to some of our 1855 members that have helped me through this journey. Melanie and Maddie, Sam and Matt, and then our super special intern who has been behind the scenes running like crazy to make sure everything's all set up for you. So Bella, shout out to you. I know you're up there. If we could all say, thanks, Bella. Love you. Okay, let's shout for everyone. Yep. This was my first masterclass, so it was a little nerve-wracking, but I want to appreciate everyone that came and took the time. And Travis, you did a phenomenal job as always. Also, PSA, don't close your eyes when you're getting anything done with your hair. If you're wondering why I'm wearing sunglasses, chemical burn. A lot of people don't realize it does actually really hurt. Just a PSA for today. It didn't all these years. Just wanted to say that. And then afterwards, I'd like everyone to come join us in the lobby. We have some cocktails and appetizers. We appreciate you all so much for coming, and we can't wait to do this again, hopefully in the fall. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Big round of applause for Kayla and 1855. Thank you so much, Kayla. And we'll see everybody in the lobby.